Good morning, everybody, and how wonderful to see so many people here today. The numbers are just ticking up as I'm looking down there. Having started with 4, we've now got nearly 120 and counting. Yes, wonderful to see you all to help us celebrate the launch of this amazing new book. My name's Catherine Jackson, and I was commissioning editor at PCCS when Helen and Dwight pitched this book to us, and I've continued to work with them on bringing their vision into print. Just to briefly outline this morning's events, we'll start off with a short interview with Dwight and Helen, the co-editors, to talk about the book. We'll then move into each contributor of talking briefly about their chapter before ending with a panel discussion and Q&A. It's very exciting to be here. It's slightly deja vu because it was actually only months back, July 2025, that I was helping Helen launch her Black Women Trauma and Therapy book, to which this book is a more than worthy companion. And it is an amazing book. And I hope those who have had the chance to look at it will agree. In it, we have many of the UK's leading Black male therapists demonstrating how they are indeed revolutionizing therapeutic thought and practice with their Black male clients. They write about their work, their influences, their clients, the contexts, the socio-political contexts of their clients' lives, and just as necessarily and powerfully, their own lives, struggles, and political and personal drivers, and what brought them into the therapy profession. For me, certainly, this book opens up a whole new panorama of what it is to be a Black man in Britain today. Its breadth of content magnificently explodes the simplistic stereotypes about Black men and the narrowness of the therapeutic vision that has served them so poorly in the past and excluded them from the attention to their needs to which they are entitled. Every therapist needs to read this book because those narrow and misleading stereotypes and assumptions are legion, both in our wider society and sadly in the therapy profession. We hope you'll buy it, of course, read it, share it widely, engage with the issues it raises, because for me, and I hope for everybody who's here today, this book is just the start. It's both a celebration of Black male therapy at its best today and a watershed that will feed myriad future developments in thinking and practice. I'm now going to pass the virtual mic over to our first speaker, Eugene Ellis, one of the greats in Black therapy in the UK today. Eugene is, of course, founder and director of Barton. We are truly honoured that he agreed to write the foreword to this book and found time to be here with us this morning. So, hi, Eugene, and over to you.
Thank you, Catherine. Always good to see you. And just first of all, just want to sort of extend my thanks to Helen and Dwight and all of the contributors, really. It's really great to see these pioneers sort of take flight. It's really beautiful to see. Also want to just take a little bit of space. I think it's quite appropriate as well to big up our men's gathering at Barton. And it's an invitation for all of the global men of majority here in this room and elsewhere to join us. It's not what you think, your immediate sort of thought about a men's gathering, but lots of intersectional dialogue, really. Yeah, come and join us. Just go to the website, find out about the men's gathering. For me, at least, it's the heart of my cutting edge sort of development, I guess, in terms of my feminine and masculine energy. So I just want to read out the foreword. I was privileged to be asked to write. So this book is a significant contribution to addressing what has been missing for far too long in therapeutic practice. It humanizes Black men and centers their pain, complexities, and brilliance. It allows Black men to speak as clinicians, thinkers, clients, brothers, lovers, sons, and fathers. And it takes those voices seriously as sources of knowledge. As a black man, I feel pain when I think about the many black men who fill our prisons both in the UK and the US. I feel pain when I see black men occupying our psychiatric wards. I feel pain through the many small and large indignities and humiliations that other black men and I have experienced. All of this constitutes relational trauma with two significant aspects. The first is that black men, and by extension, black women, have inherited trauma through generationally transmitted experiences of division and brutalization during the periods of enslavement and colonization, and ongoingly through white supremacy and the white gaze. The second is the modern world's refusal to address this wound, its refusal to recognize its consequences, and its active and passive and passionate turning away. We cannot change our inheritance, but we can turn our attention towards the distress, and in so doing, find a place of healing, not just for Black men, but for all of us. These pages are more than accounts of suffering. They explore how racism, colonialism, and masculinity, faith, sexuality, and class and migration have shaped Black men's inner worlds, which in turn come to affect their encounters with the modern mental health system. This book goes beyond the misreading of Black men's distress as danger or defiance and explores how this affects diagnosis and treatment. We are invited into places that heal and transform, that heal and trauma-informed care that does not pathologize, where Black men are no longer problems to be managed, but people to be met. For clinicians, students, policymakers, and anyone who cherishes Black men, this book serves as both an invitation and a challenge. It is an invitation to listen more deeply, to expand your understanding of trauma beyond the individual, and to rethink what support really looks like. It asks us to stop demanding that Black men contort themselves to fit a hostile system and instead to reshape systems and frames of mind where Black men can heal in the full range of their humanity. This book matters. My hope is that you not only read it, but you also allow it to move you. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Eugene. Thank you. Right, now we move on to Helen and Dwight in conversation with me. Hello, co-editors of this book. Right, right, we've got to move on. We've only got 10 minutes. So you've both written very powerfully and personally about what motivated you to want to edit this collection. Can you very briefly summarize those drivers, those motivations? Start with you, Helen.
Oh, okay. What motivated me? I think I would say if we go back to the conference, the Black Men Trauma and Mental Health Conference back in 2023, and it kind of fits with the theme of this book, especially the introduction that me and Dwight wrote about Black men in the context of their mental health, and how they have been forgotten and how they are invisible. Um, and the need to kind of shine a spotlight on them, you know, as a community, us in the profession, and what we need to be doing to support them more, you know. And so with the book, it's the same thing. It's the same thing. Shining that spotlight. They're not invisible. They're not forgotten by us. Um, And yeah, doing all that and looking at it through an intersectional lens. It's not just an add-on. We're not just Black men, just like with the Black women book, we're not just an add-on, you know. Um, there are theories that the contributors have come up with themselves, but also highlighting, I think, their brilliance. That comes out in the book very much. You know, they're not just statistics or higher this or lower that. We have some brilliant Black men in the profession doing some really great work. And
Fantastic. You'll start answering all the other questions if I don't stop you here.
oh, sorry, yeah, I can keep going on.
Okay,
Over to you, Dwight.
right. She hasn't left you much to say, but you could just say,
It's,
I agree.
so I say I agree, and I'll just bang my gavel here or something like that. No, what I will say is to add to that is I think Helen's right because the contributors have had so much richness to say. And one of the things that drew me to actually get involved with this book is, it wasn't from Eugene's point, is the deconstructing of this sort of social construction of what it is to be black. And but as a consequence of that, a black man. We're told how we're supposed to be, perform, and so on, and, and interact, which, in my opinion, leads to an awful lot of mental health distress for black men. So having the chance to sit with other, um, I don't know, storytellers, and there's a reason I'm using that phrase. I think that was really quite important for us to then put our narratives on the pages so we can say, okay, this is not who we are. This is who we are. Back to Eugene's point, talking from a place of pain is necessary sometimes. Talking from a place of authority is something we're often not allowed to be. So to be able to have a place where we can do that, that's one of the things that brought me to this book. And of course, to work alongside the wonderful Helen. So it goes without saying. So
Fantastic. A lot of what's in the book is actually is new material. Many of the
mm.
contributors are not widely published. Um, how did reading the chapters affect you personally as they came in, as you read them? Do you want to start this time, Dwight?
I can do. And I'm going to repeat a story I probably told you and Helen a couple of times. So forgive me. Everybody else hasn't heard it. This book, when I got the proofs for this book, I remember sitting back and thinking to myself, this is a heavy book. It's not just the weight of the book. It's the stories and what they mean and how they touch me. So when I was reading through the book, every time I go through chapters and so on, they impact me in different ways. I learned an awful lot about myself as a black man and other people around me through reading some of the chapters in this book, which is why I love it so much. Um, and this feeling moved has been a whole part of the process. I had to be moved in order to fully engage with it. Otherwise, I suspect I would have gotten in its way in some way. I'll pass over to Helen there.
I agree.
Yeah, and to echo what you said about being moved, I think so. I spent like 4 days really immersed in the book, um, all the chapters to write the summaries for each one in the introduction. And I wrote about the impact it had on me in my notes, the notes from the editor's section at the beginning. You know, I felt really, really touched by the stories, and I wrote about feeling altered, and I'm still in that altering and trying to make sense of it. But I think for me, there's something about the lived experience. It's not just a theoretical book. It's everyone in the chapter has spoken about their own lived experience as a black man. And so it's the lived experience alongside the theoretical that makes it really special. So yeah, for me, very touched, very moving, and I am still altering. So get the book and you can read all about my notes and my altering. Yeah.
Mm, mm, mm. So how do you hope these chapters will affect and influence its readers?
I can maybe go first, I guess. I think a couple of things. Well, first of all, it's hard to empathize with a person whose story you don't know. And often as black men, black people, we're not allowed to tell our stories. I can say we don't tell, we do. We find different ways, but we're often not allowed to tell our stories. We're not often not allowed to. It feels like it's dangerous to actually express what it's like for us. But one of the things I hope for this particular book is that in reading some of the narratives, not just of the clients, but also of the practitioners themselves, it helps people to think a bit more deeply about what it is to be a black man, both for black men and also for others who are just allies, who are not just allies, who are allies to black men. The second part to it is if we deconstruct the social constructions of blackness and black masculinity, then what we actually end up with, in my view, is a wide range of experiences of black masculinity. It isn't just that sort of heteronormative patriarchal idea. It's something which is a lot more rich and nuanced in its presentation. I think that's massively important for black men.
I don't have much more to share than what Dwight has said, apart from I think there's something about what this book is doing, it's really a real intersectional lens. It's providing a real intersectional lens into the experiences, the lives of Black men at the different intersections of their identity. And again, another thing that makes the book special, um, and nowhere to be found as well, really. And so this is much more than diversity or, working with men, it's a real intersectional lens, sorry, into Black men and their different experiences. And I think that's, yeah, in answer to your question, that's what the readers will get out of it and practitioners as well.
Mm-hmm. I'm guessing that for you guys, and hopefully that's the case, is that this isn't it. You haven't just done it and it's finished. Have you got thoughts about how you would want to try and take it forward, take the message beyond the pages of the book, as well as introduce people to its pages?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, the Black Women book, because I'm not going to forget that, and this book, they're both stepping stones. There's much more to be done, I feel. It can't just be books that are just out there. It has to be a lot more. And I think for me, with the two books, what they really speak to is how our profession, it speaks to our profession in terms of we have been, fighting for our voices to be heard for so long,
Mm.
and how much longer can we wait? I don't feel like we can wait anymore. And so, what can we do? We need to do for ourselves. And so I think the next stepping stone is all of us coming together at a conference in October that I hope to put on, and for us to thinking about what is the next stepping stone, for us, by us, what do we need to do? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. Dwight, you?
And I'll echo Helen's point in this. It's very well put. I think something I remember talking to you about, Catherine, when this book was being produced, when put together. I thought this has never been done before. This and the Black Women's book, they've never been done before, and yet I've been in this profession 25 years, 20 odd years, and there are people who can talk to you today who've been in this profession even longer than that, and yet Black authors of their experience have never come together in this sort of way, not been allowed to come together and put out a book like this one. So it can't stop here. It can't just be a one-off. Um, I think Jimmy open the door is important, and let's see where it goes from there. I hope this becomes like a start point for all the authors and many others to take their stories forward.
I love that notion of like this is just opening the door and it's pouring in, actually, like participants, the numbers. Okay, well, thank you both. I think it's time to move on now for Helen to introduce the first contributor. Yeah.
Yep, indeed. Thank you. And actually, before I do that, what I wanted to do as well was to thank everyone for being here today and to sharing, it's bank holiday weekend, and for sharing, 2 hours of your Saturday with us. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And without further ado, introducing Rotimi Akinsetti, who's written chapter 1 in the book. And the title of his chapter is My History is in My Skin, Understanding the Mental Health Needs of Black Men in the UK over the past 45 years. Welcome, Rotimi. Thank you. And I'll leave you to speak to your chapter.
Thank you, Helen. I've just seen myself on screen. I didn't realize my room was so messy. Apologies, people. Good morning, everyone. Good to see so many people here as well for this subject. It's left my skin tingling, strangely enough. Thanks to Helen, Dwight, and Catherine for bringing this together and for inviting me to be part of it. Thank you so much. As Helen's already stated, I've entitled my chapter, My History is in My Skin, and I first used that phrase 5 or 6 years ago as an invitation to a men's group just after COVID and just after George Floyd, and Wayne Mertins Brown, who's also as well a contributor to the book, and I put this group together to work with and help Black men reflect on what was happening of and about us at the time. Thanks very much for joining me on that journey then, Wayne. That was an invitation to Black men then, and in a way, it's still an invitation now, because the starting point is simple. The skin that we live in is never really just skin. So for Black men of African descent all over the world, but particularly here in the UK, our skin carries history. It carries memory. It carries stories that didn't begin with us, but that live through us. It holds struggle and resistance, but it holds something a little bit quieter as well. The experience of moving through the world, being seen, misseen, and sometimes not being seen at all. And I think every single Black man I've met and spoke to has that kind of experience and story to tell. So in this chapter and in this glorious book, I explore what that does to us, not just socially, but psychologically, because these experiences don't stay outside. They get underneath the skin. They shape how we think, how we feel, and how we hold ourselves, and often how we stay silent. Now, let me try and make that real for a moment. Those of you that know me, and I recognize a number of names here, welcome. You'll know that I'm a bit of a football freak, and I can't talk or do a presentation or any facilitation without mentioning football. Now, for many, many years, I was a season ticket holder at Premier League Football Club, which I'm not going to mention the name of because I know I'm going to get pure grief. But right now for that team, it's tense. We're in the relegation zone with 4 games left. Now, you might get an idea of who that team is if you're interested in the game. What I've noticed when I've gone to the games or when I'm with supporters watching the games, there's a strong sense of camaraderie. Fans pulling together, we're in this together, and I feel that and I'm part of it. But at the same time, I'm aware, especially when I'm at the stadium, and I'm there sometimes with my daughter, that I am one of very few Black men in that space. So there are 2 experiences happening at once: connection and difference, belonging and awareness. And I find myself wondering when I'm sitting there, what would that camaraderie feel like if most of the supporters were Black men? Would my body feel different? Would I feel less vigilant? Would I feel less held together? Now, in a way, I give you that example because I contrast that with this space, this book, and this moment. So standing along my brilliant co-authors, all Black men, each with our own stories and our own journeys, there is a camaraderie here too. But this camaraderie feels quite different. It's not built only on a shared outcome. It's built on recognition. And understanding that does not need explaining. A knowing of what it means to live in Black skin as a Black man. I quote just a line from the book, if you don't mind me doing that. In Black majority spaces, my skin is no longer a question to be answered or a presence to be managed. It simply exists. And in that, something in me softens. That difference matters because it tells us something crucial about mental health and male mental health. That is, that it is not just about what is happening inside us. It's about the spaces we move through, spaces that allow us to soften, or spaces that require us to be and stay guarded. Now, I see this in my professional life as well, and Black men who are in professions will also as well see that. I've been a senior leader in higher education, in the National Health Service, in community counselling services, and I've often been the only Black person in the room, or certainly the only Black person with some level of seniority. And again, there are 2 realities there. On the surface, leadership and contribution, and underneath, being read, interpreted, and sometimes misunderstood. And I'm sure this is familiar to a lot of people in the room. The pressure then not just to perform, but to represent. And of course, that has a cost. So when we talk about mental health for Black men, we have to talk about context, about environment, and what it means to live in Black skin in predominantly white spaces. And this is where the chapter itself shifts from description to challenge, because the question becomes, what are we going to do about it? And Helen's already alluded to this in what she had to say in her introduction. What happens when Black men are given space to speak openly about their emotional lives? In community, in public, in spaces where they are recognized. I want to suggest that what happens is this. There is release, there is connection, and there is healing. So in a way, my chapter and this book and everything that Dwight and Helen and Catherine have put together is a call to action. I can't stress this enough. It's a call to action. Whether you're a therapist or not, you need to ask yourself, how culturally aware are you? And if you're a therapist, how culturally real is your practice? Not just in theory, but in how people actually feel when they are in a room with you. If you're a leader in your own profession, ask, what environments am I creating? Do people have to hold themselves together to be here? And if you are just a member of the community and nothing else, ask this question. Where are the spaces for honest and real conversation? Not performance, but truth. Because we can't keep asking Black men to adapt to systems that don't see them, that don't see us. We have to build systems and spaces that recognize what Black skin carries. Not just trauma, but history, identity, and I have to say, strength. So my chapter and the book is not just about understanding, it's about a level of responsibility that we have to create environments where Black men don't just survive, but we're able to soften, to speak, and ultimately to be. Now, let me end here before I continue or go on a tirade. When I say my history is in my skin, I'm not only talking about a burden, I'm talking about, well, the overused word, resilience, but I'm talking about also as well survival. Most importantly, I'm talking about possibility. Even though Black skin carries stories of pain, but also stories of power, the real question is, what are each of us going to do to create spaces where these stories themselves can be told? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rotimi.
Thank you, Rotimi. That was very powerful, and you can see the reactions from lots of people who were joined with us. And moving on, thank you, to chapter 2. So my colleague and co-editor, Dwight Turner and Divine Trera, are going to be coming on.
All right. Hello, good morning to everybody. I've got everyone on my screen right now, so hopefully Sebastian can just isolate myself and Divine. That happened? All right, then I suppose we'll move on. Now, chapter 2, which was titled Black Men in Academia, and I'll do a brief introduction for this, involved a dialogue between myself and Professor Divine, talking about the experiences as Black men within academia, within white spaces, sort of following on in a way from Rotimi's sort of very well put sort of speech around, or talk, mentioning around what it's like to exist in spaces which are not built for us, they're not constructed for us. And academia is the quintessential whitest space you could probably find in the UK. And so we had this sort of dialogue, which we had to distill down into 8,000 words. Divine, what would you like to say about the chapter in the
It's
time
great to
we've
be.
got?
No, thank you, Dwight. It's great to be here. It's great to see so many people. Exciting. Thank you to PCS book, Catherine and Dwight and Helen for the invitation. So going straight into it on account of the time, Dwight, it was an absolute pleasure for us to come together again to do some work in this chapter. And maybe to stick to script, why don't I read 2 or 3 lines, right? Because we only got 7 minutes.
Please go for it. Go for it. Please. I've got a couple of lines I want to read out as well. So you go for it.
Yeah.
Please.
So the first small paragraph is being a Black academic is difficult, as we've described. This is on page 44. It is therefore felt important to us to explore the role of trauma in both our experiences. Given that both of us talked about experiences of racism in our roles, the trauma of the experiences and how they sit with us. And I think Rotimi has spoken clearly to that. And the last bit I'd read is, we have been unapologetic and we've openly discussed the impact of weathering microaggressions. And I think, Dwight, it's important for me to say I felt very moved when we're doing the chapter, because we're not, in a sense, whilst we're talking about being Black academics, we're also talking about every Black student in the room, the Black students in this country that we see within our profession and beyond, and the disappointments that come within the system. Facing racism and oppression over many years in different educational contexts, and the toll it takes for us to survive in white educational systems, in the mental health and educational world in which we've worked and continue to work. And we find ourselves inviting debates and endeavors of all who are engaged in the work to recenter marginalized voices, to challenge systemic inequality, and to reimagine knowledge production in ways that value diverse worldviews. So I felt our chapter, really, Dwight, was about bringing in our history, our ontology, our theories. So how about a pause for that and just kind of hear your response?
No, I think you put it very, very well. In fact, you probably encapsulated it better than I can do at this time in the morning. But there were some things I think to add to that from my side. I think what we do quite well in this chapter as well is in focusing on the students, we're also focusing in on the political landscape in which lots of our students reside within. So I think there's a great part in the chapter where you talk about students who are struggling to survive economically whilst on a university campus, which plenty of other students, maybe white students or middle class students, they don't have those same sorts of struggles. For Black students, those are more heightened in a way. Or even when religion comes in, the intersection of religion and race comes in, and how then do university spaces need to adapt themselves in order to meet those sort of diverse needs for people who are Muslim or from different faiths, for example. But one of the things I really appreciated in our dialogue was the reinvention or the questioning of what it is to be a Black academic. Even from the very early part of the chapter, the part where we're using joy, we laugh, and we get on well. So there's that side to it. But being able to laugh, we don't have to perform whiteness in those sorts of spaces, and that's not always easy. To bring one's own truly authentic academic self, where one can have some humor, is a revolutionary act by its very nature, because we're often taught we've got to be head down and demure, all those sorts of things. To actually, Black joy is a revolutionary act. And that's something which I felt was really quite important when we had to start to understand what is it to be a Black academic. Now, I'm aware of the time, so I don't want to run too far, but just to give people a bit of a flavor of the chapter. So please do encourage people to read the chapter, engage with it, and ask questions of it. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But are there any final points that you want to raise around the chapter yourself, Divine, at all?
Well, just 2 things, right? We center the chapter into a decolonized methodology of using dialogue as a way that is an authentic and equal knowledge generating partner, a way of writing, right?
Yeah.
And in the chapter, I spoke about Ubuntu, which I'm a man of African heritage, and Ubuntu and the Zulu language, but also the Bantu languages spoken by over 14 million people. The famous quote, Umuntu ngumuntu ngabantu. A person is only a person through other persons. And this idea of being relational and how we might come together and find a space in which we can heal, in which we can hear each other, even though it might be tough. So I really liked that idea that we could bring joy, we could bring strength, we could bring culture, language, and stand proudly on ontologies that stand as equal knowledge generating partners with Eurocentric systems. So loved it.
You know what? Brilliant. I think that is the perfect space to actually finish our conversation, because what we've sort of modeled there is actually how the chapter came together in a way. So, listen, Divine, as always, thank you very much for taking some time to speak to everyone about the chapter today. Please, everyone, give him a round of applause.
Thank you so much,
in the chat there. Pleasure to see you again. Now, because of the time, we're going to move straight on, please, to Wayne Mertins Brown and Helen are going to be talking about their dialogue. Let me put Wayne on the screen. Thank you. And I will step back and I will leave you to it.
Thank you, Dwight. And hello, Wayne.
Hello, good morning. Good morning.
Yeah, and I think before we start, just to kind of set the scene, I just want to say that Wayne's chapter, I interviewed him, and it was an interview in 3 parts that took 3 hours long. And it was a real privilege, Wayne sharing his story with me. It's a very deeply personal story. Um, Trials, tribulations, and transformations, what we see here now in Wayne. And yeah, just to say again, a real privilege and honor. So thank you for sharing it with me and with everyone else in the book. And when I started off the interview, I said, Wayne, where would you like to start in describing your journey to coming out as gay? And so today I say to you, where would you like to start in your 7 minutes? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I did write some thoughts down, some words down, so I'll go to them. Thank you, Helen. Thank you for the experience. Thank you for the invitation to be a contributor to this important piece of work. I really did find it a beautiful resource for my own continuing development. So thank you. So I'd like to start with saying, as a child, I went to bed every night and I prayed to God, please God, let me like girls. Let me wake up liking girls tomorrow. And for me, that prayer captures the depth of shame I carried from a very early age. Because very quickly I learned that who I was not acceptable. I was called a sissy and I was bullied and picked on by one brother and the other brother as well. It was tough. And the one time I did as a child speak my truth in the family, my mother said to me, don't ever say that again. So I learned something very important at a very early age, that telling my truth was dangerous. Years later, in a really emotional overwhelm, I went to my godfather and I told him that I was in love. That's all I said. And his reply was, what's his name? Do you remember that, Helen? I'm really telling you about that. Yeah. And in that moment, my life changed. So I realized I didn't get rejected, basically, and I could speak my truth in an environment where I was allowed to speak it fully, and it was not going to be shamed and turned back on me. What I learned to understand now as a therapist is Black gay men are not just dealing with their sexuality, but they're dealing with multiple layers of trauma, racial trauma, cultural trauma, religious trauma, and deep relational trauma. So coming out is not a single event. It's a lifelong process of unlearning shame. So in my chapter, I speak about what I call my second coming out. Because even after I accepted my sexuality myself, I then had to face the world. Horrid racialized stereotypes, rejection within the gay community that I thought would welcome me and keep me safe, protect me, and a sense of not feeling I really belonged anywhere. So the real question then became for me, where do I exist fully as my true self? One-to-one therapy helped me. It was a significant turning point. It led me to seek out others' Black therapeutic spaces, and what I discovered there was powerful. I gained an ancestral understanding of who I was through an African-centered psychological understanding of myself and my history and my people and those who have come before. And that was immense. I was not broken, is what I found out. I was not wrong. I was not damaged. In fact, I was blessed by my sexuality. So that development shaped the way I started to work with my clients. So I support Black men in moving towards that self-actualization of being their fuller selves. I support them in moving towards the identity of knowing themselves more fully and who they are, and finding spaces that allow them to show up. And in some cases, they may face rejection by loved ones and lose those loving relationships. But I like to help them understand that they do not have to lose themselves. And I spoke about my father to you, Helen. You know, he was somewhat homophobic. But I also want to have compassion for him, because I understand that he came to Britain from a colonialized Jamaica in 1952, aged 24 years old. A Black man arriving in this country that did not welcome him, having to learn how to survive, how to fight, to find work, to build a life in the face of racism and all kinds of existential hardships. So when I look at his life now, I don't see the man who couldn't meet me emotionally due to his own toxic conditioning. I see a man who had to become who he became in order to survive and to exist and to make it in life and make it in the world. And see, as part of my childhood was painful at his hands, but there were things I deeply needed that I did not receive. But it's not my place to stand in judgment of him. My work now is to hold compassion, to understand that sometimes the people we need most to show us love, understanding, and compassion are the very people who never got given the tools to deliver that. They didn't know how. Because in this reality, I have an understanding now that Black men are the least likely to access therapy, talking therapy. We know that, but yet we also know that they're overrepresented in psychiatric crisis centers. So my work is to help create space where Black men can tell their truth and be themselves without fear, without shame, and without losing themselves. Because when a Black man can finally tell the truth about who he is, that's not just healing, but that's liberation.
Thank you. And I feel compelled to say that your dad, despite, what you've described, he was really proud of you at the end, wasn't he?
Yes, he
In
was.
that rehabilitation center when he was like, look, my son, my son. Do you remember when you were walking with
I
him in the
do, and I remember
hallway?
thinking, wow, I know my dad loved me. I know
Yeah.
he did, but he found it hard to do it. He found it hard to do it, to love me. And that's all part of the mix.
Yeah.
And I loved him, but it
Indeed.
was challenging. And, our parents are supposed to be our secure base. It's hard when that's not the case.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And so we move on now to Dr. Ron Dodsrow. Ron, and your chapter, um, When Professionals Get Sense Making Wrong, Understanding Trauma and PTSD Among Black Men Who Experience Community Violence. Thank you, Ron, and
Thank you.
over to you.
I'm going to jump straight into it. I want to start with a saying that I grew up with. I am because we are. Without we, I am not. And since we are, therefore I am. A philosophy that has shaped everything about how I understand trauma. Because when Danielle Burnock writes that trauma is personal, that healing begins when someone enters your pain and hears the screams, I completely agree. But I think she's only telling half the story. Healing doesn't only come from one person entering the pain. It comes from multiple people, multiple systems surrounding the individual. Trauma doesn't only impact the one, it ripples outward into families, friendships, communities. And that plural lens is what my chapter is built on. I'm a black man from Wandsworth, South London, big part of my identity. My teenage years coincided with a period when South London boroughs had some of the highest rates of gang-affiliated violence and murder. I knew people who were gang-affiliated. I grew up with them, schooled with them. At a young age, I witnessed things that I now understand clinically as exposure to traumatic events. At the time, I just thought we were going crazy. I now work as a clinical psychologist, and in all of my clinical experience working within statutory services, I've never seen Black men who experience community violence willingly seek formal support for their mental health. And I emphasize the willingly because I've seen them in mental health hospitals and in prisons. That gap between the pain I know exists and the care that isn't being accessed is what drove me to write this chapter. And it's also what drove me to leave the NHS. The research is unambiguous. Gang-affiliated young people are disproportionately affected by mental health difficulties. They are 6 times more likely than non-gang affiliated peers to experience symptoms of PTSD. A UK study found that 90% of male gang members had experienced violence in the past 5 years. Common sense. The more violence someone is exposed to, the greater their trauma responses will be. But here is what troubles me. When these young men present to mental health services, PTSD is frequently the last thing on the table. Black boys are more likely to receive a diagnosis of disruptive behavior disorder, conduct disorder, antisocial personality disorder, less likely to receive a diagnosis of PTSD. In one study of 519 young men, 17 had previously received the sole diagnosis of conduct disorder. But when those men were assessed properly for other mental health conditions, 92% met criteria for depression, anxiety, or PTSD. 92%. This is not a small oversight. This is a systemic failure. Since slavery, the social construction of the Black man in the Western world has been imbued with narratives of crime, violence, and anti-authoritarianism. These stereotypes have become ingrained in our culture and history, and they follow Black men into the consulting room. Implicit biases shape what clinicians look for. Clinician burnout amplifies those biases, and the result is that young Black men's survival responses, hypervigilance, avoidance, irritability, emotional dysregulation, are read as antisocial, as oppositional, as criminal, rather than as what they actually are, trauma responses. What looks like defiance might be undiagnosed PTSD making it hard to conform. What looks like apathy might be a nervous system that cannot sustain attention because it never powers down. What looks like aggression might be communication shaped by fear and survival. The misdiagnosis doesn't just fail the individual, it reinforces the very stereotypes that led to the misdiagnosis in the first place. It's a cycle, and breaking it requires us to fundamentally reimagine how we work. So within my chapter, I gave a bit of a case study, and I want to talk to you about Kay. When I first met Kay, he was standing close to the door, scanning the room. When I invited him to sit, he declined, said, "I'm cool here." In many services, this might have been recorded as disengagement or oppositional behavior. In this space, I understood it as safety. Before I asked about symptoms, diagnosis, goals, I asked a very different question. Help me understand how you stay safe. He paused, and then he said, "Actually, you're the first person who's ever asked me that." Kay had been exposed to repeated community violence from adolescence, witnessing assaults, peers murdered, persistent threat. His PTSD was written all over his presentation, but it had never been named. He had fragmented sleep, nightmares, hypervigilance, avoidance of areas associated with that loss. He would escalate quickly when he felt disrespected or caught off guard. Crucially, Kay didn't describe himself as traumatized. To him, violence was normal, expected, unavoidable. So when I introduced the word trauma, he laughed it off and said, "This is just life." So rather than challenge that, I got curious. We mapped what his body did in moments of perceived danger. We talked about the amygdala, the hippocampus, the prefrontal cortex in his language. And when I reflected that his nervous system was doing exactly what it had learned to do in an unsafe environment, something shifted. Hypervigilance was no longer pathology to be removed. It was a protection developed in response to chronic threat. Avoidance became a strategy for managing grief. Aggression became communication shaped by fear and survival. We introduced the language of PTSD way later on in therapy, once it felt shared rather than imposed. And by then, the diagnosis wasn't a label. It was a framework that validated his experience without criminalizing his survival. Healing in this context did not mean the absence of danger. It meant being understood within it. It meant not having to wait for safety in order to deserve care. Kay is not an anomaly. He is one of thousands of Black men walking into rooms, clinical rooms, courtrooms, classrooms, carrying the weight of what has happened to them and being handed a diagnosis that criminalizes their survival rather than names their pain. The question I'm going to leave with you is not academic, it's not theoretical, it's this. The next time you are working with a young Black man, what story are you going to tell about him? Because the story you tell will shape the care he receives, and the care he receives may determine whether he ever comes back. We do not get to be neutral here, because silence is also a diagnostic decision too. And I'm going to leave it there. Please read my chapter. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you very much, Ron. That's, you know what? Hopefully you can see all the applause and the hearts for what you've just said there. Very powerfully put. Please do read this chapter. Thank you very much for what you've said. And I'm just going to shout out to everybody who's watching this right now. I'm loving the fact you're all putting like hearts and applause up there. You know, if we were in the same room, you'd be like on your head, on standing up and applauding to half these speakers right now. So keep doing that, please. I encourage you. I'm going to invite to the virtual stage now, Joel Simpson. Where are you, Joel? And hi, Joel. Good to see you.
Hey, Dwight.
I just want to read this part out before you actually start here. Joel Simpson is a UKCP registered psychotherapist for individuals and couples and intimately partnered people, and a supervisor living and working soulfully through the heart. Now, I love that because I've heard you speak before, and it's just something about how you deliver your story, and that's part of the chapters I saw it. So please, Joel, tell us a bit about your chapter.
Oh, thank you for the welcome and the introduction. Perhaps to begin, I would invite you, if you're able, to just take a breath with me as we consider this chapter. I invite the breath as a way to give thanks and as a way to resource. The chapter that I have written about is tender. It, as far as I understand it, the themes have not been explored before in psychotherapeutic literature. I am writing specifically about the experience of, or experiences of, African diasporan men who experience sexual violation and rape in adulthood. I'm on this bridge as I talk to you between the part of me that wrote this chapter and the part of me that now is speaking about the chapter. And there is this tender space between, which is really vulnerable, because through soulful practice, as I understand it, is this invitation to surrender from what I already know and from what's been written and from what's been prepared, to consider what wants to be spoken at this time. And that's vulnerable because it engages the more incompetent part of myself that doesn't really know what's coming next. And in some way, that's how the chapter itself came to be. I think I was the last person to be asked to contribute to this book, and it came and Helen contacted me, and I had an immediate yes, because I knew this was the chapter that was to come, but I wasn't quite sure how. And then moments after, it seemed I was on a plane going to one of my grandmother's 100th birthday last year, and this chapter began to write itself. There are these 12 tales that express the experiences of some African diasporan men. I'll begin with one, Dwayne. See how this lands in you. Dwayne says, when last did you read a headline about a 6'2" straight Black man who was raped as an adult, and his sexuality and strength wasn't questioned, and he wasn't ridiculed and made out to be a weak gay pussy? I'm supposed to be the man doing the fucking, not getting bulled in my backside without consent like some bitch. It's women and kids that pull on people's heartstrings. Big old Black men like me, who shouldn't be doing this nastiness and should know better, aren't worthy of that kind of respect or understanding. We aren't even thought about. Who should believe me? I learned to keep my mouth shut so no one is triggered by my shame and existence. I'm tired of those reductive narratives that say if you're into anal as a Black man, something dodgy must have happened to you as a kid. But it doesn't work like that. Just notice how Dwayne's recount of his experience lands in your body. It was important for me that I write in a way which is unfiltered. Too many African diasporan men come to therapy and feel that they have to censor themselves to meet the sensitivities of the therapist that they are working with. And too many therapists police the therapy room around what is allowed to be spoken about and what is not. And so in seeking to join this collective of men who are writing in this book to revolutionize therapeutic practice and thought, it felt essential for me to be able to use the language of the men as they speak. I want to give another example that from my chapter that is often not thought about as well, and that's the experience of men who are forced to penetrate. The law considers at the moment that it is men that rape women and not women who rape men. There is a misconception about erections, for example, and how they form, that they only form in moments of pleasure. They can also form when people are terrified and shamed and humiliated And there are a number of men in our collective who have experiences where they are forced to penetrate and cannot tell anybody about it. This is the experience of Obadiah. He says, as a Congolese man living in Wales, do you know how hard it is to be worn down daily by a white woman who demands sex? She makes me feel like a failure for not having a thick black dick to please her like her ex. I'm average size like so many black men, yet she's threatening to tell our youth pastor and everyone at our church that I'm possessed by the demon of homosexuality and I've got a small, childlike, circumcised dick. It's like my body isn't my own. It's become hers. So look at her. She's everyone's dream. But I'm living a nightmare. What's worse is no one would believe me. She's the perfect white woman, blonde and busty. Men rape women, not the other way around. I try not to come inside her to punish her with revenge. But she demands it and won't stop till I give in to her. I hate myself for not being able to get her pregnant, just like I promised to everyone I would on our wedding day. I'm fucking 40 now and have become what my pa prayed I wouldn't be, worthless and weak, just like my dead ma.
I'm on mute. Joel, thank you for that. It's very powerful. And I think, how you started in terms of taking a moment to take a breath. We should all do that now. Um, and also, I want to thank you for being the voice of those men, those 12 tales, and the ones that you shared today. Thank you. Okay, so taking a breath and moving on, I'm going to introduce now Bafur Babio.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, hello. And just to introduce you and your chapter 6 in the book, Trauma and Resistance, Black Men in Britain through an Afro-pessimist lens. Over to you, Bafur.
Thank you so much, Helen, for the introduction, and to Dwight for inviting me to contribute to the volume. But before I continue speaking, I must say that it's a virtual space, but it's been transformed into, it's as if I'm in the room with everybody. It's so alive and embodied, listening to the other brothers talking and bringing the stories through. So thank you. And I'm struck by the shared concern that we're all speaking to. So thank you again, Helen and Dwight, and to PCCS Books for publishing it. Helen, you've named my chapter Trauma and Resistance. It begins with something that happened to me in 2005. A few weeks after the 7th July bombings in London, I was traveling through Victoria Station on my way to work. Armed police were everywhere. I was stopped and searched. When I asked why, I was told I fitted the profile. I was quite young then, black, wearing a wax print shirt and carrying a rucksack. In one sense, nothing dramatic happened. I wasn't arrested. I was allowed to continue my journey, but that's not the whole story. Something in me had shifted. I remember the adrenaline, the tension, and strangely, a kind of excitement. I also remember the question that stayed with me afterwards. Why me? Only later did I begin to think about what had happened psychically. I hadn't connected that search to an earlier experience 14 years before, when I had been searched at the UK port of entry and tested on suspicion that I had swallowed drugs for trafficking. Now, that earlier moment hadn't disappeared entirely, but it became strangely unavailable. It wasn't linked in my mind to the scene at Victoria Station. So one of the questions I sit with in the chapter is this. What happens when experiences of racialized subjection are endured, remembered in fragments, or kept apart from one another? Not all such experiences are forgotten. Some remain painfully vivid, but others may be normalized, split off, or not only understood, or only understood much later as part of a wider pattern. I draw on John Steiner's idea of the psychic retreat, the way the mind may protect itself from what feels too overwhelming to bear. That retreat may preserve something, but it also has a cost. We've been hearing cost uh, from other contributors this morning. Some experiences remain unthought. They sit outside ordinary connection. They cannot yet be mourned. The chapter also sits with the contradictions in the term Black British. For me, that identity has never felt fixed or simple. It carries my Ghanaian inheritance, migration memory, Britishness, and the wider histories of Black life in this country. There is a pull towards belonging, and at the same time, a repeated experience of being held at a distance. Now, that tension matters clinically because it becomes internal. It shapes how injury is registered, how scrutiny is understood, how one becomes to trust or mistrust belonging, and how the self is held together under pressure. By anti-Blackness, I mean the recurring social, institutional, and psychic positioning of Blackness. Blackness as threat, lack, danger, or less than human. I use Afro-pessimism as one way of thinking about this. I know the term can sound stark. I use it cautiously, not because it settles the matter, but because it refuses to soften the reality of anti-Blackness. It asks what happens when Blackness is repeatedly placed outside the category of fully human. This is not an easy idea to bring into therapeutic thought, but some experiences cannot be properly heard if we rush too quickly to reassurance. In therapy with Black men, what is brought may not only be internal distress, it may also be the psychic impact of being watched, feared, misread, restrained, pathologized, or offered help in ways that leave the wider structure untouched. The external world does not remain external. It becomes part of our inner worlds. It can appear as shame, vigilance, rage, withdrawal, bodily tension, or a difficulty trusting what one knows. That's the cost. I use three composite fictionalized clinical examples. Lithabo, a South African man living in Britain, finds that a friendship with a white female colleague becomes a site of shame, fear, and institutional scrutiny, carrying echoes of apartheid and the regulation of interracial contact. Ismail, a Black British man racially abused at work and then offered therapy by the organization. Ismail asks, why am I the one being treated when the institution itself seems to be the problem? And then to Andre, an asylum seeker from Burundi, is offered a therapist partly because they share language and heritage. On the surface, this looks culturally thoughtful, but shared language does not remove difference. Shared heritage doesn't guarantee safety. I also ask whether the dyad itself was being used extractively as evidence that the organization was being inclusive. The therapist's resistance lies in refusing that flattering positioning and insisting that Andre's practical and social needs must not be bypassed. Across these examples, I'm trying to think about what therapists are being asked to hold, not only trauma in the individual sense, and not only political or historical injury, but the movement between them. How outer realities become inner states, how inner states carry the imprint of history. I'm interested in what happens inside me, the therapist. For the Black therapist, these themes may stir echoes of one's own racialized experience. For other therapists who have not had to think deeply about these issues, the work may require a different kind of self-examination. Either way, the therapist's task is not to rush into certainty. This is where I return to an Akan folktale, Anansi and the pot of wisdom, the shattered pot of wisdom. Anansi tries in the folktale to hoard wisdom and place it beyond the reach of others. But the pot breaks and wisdom spills out into the world. I use this as a reminder that the therapist cannot be the one who already knows. Even when we bring theory, experience, and clinical knowledge, we have to remain open to being taught by the client story, by the supervisor's story. There is also a wider tension here between psychoanalysis and Afropessimism. They meet, for me, in their willingness to stay with difficult knowledge. Psychoanalysis asks, what has been defended against, split off, repeated, or left unthought? Afropessimism asks, what the world itself refuses to know about anti-Blackness. Where they diverge is around repair. Psychoanalysis often stays with the possibility that what is unconscious can be brought into thought, mourned, and made more bearable. Afropessimism, I think, is more severe. It questions whether anti-Blackness can be repaired in that way, because it's not only an internal wound, but a structuring condition of the world. The clinical challenge for us is to hold both the possibility of psychic movement and the refusal of false consolation. So, what does an Afro-pessimist lens offer therapy? I should say that the chapter does not hold that question from a place of certainty. Therapy has its own pull towards repair, consolation, and hope. I notice that pull in myself, even as I write about not rushing too quickly to reassurance. There are moments where I find myself reaching for the reparative possibilities of therapy, recognition, mourning, contact, resistance. I do not think this cancels the argument. It may be part of the argument. The slipperiness is the work itself. To hold an Afro-pessimist lens clinically is not to become fixed or hardened. It is to notice the movement between facing what may not be repairable and still remaining with the client in a therapeutic relation. So I do not think this lens offers hope in the easy sense. It doesn't say that everything can be repaired if only it is spoken about. But therapy may still offer something important, a place where what has been endured is recognized, where what has been split off can begin to return, where shame, rage, fear, the cost, withdrawal, and forgetting can be thought about rather than carried silently. That may not be repair in the simple sense, but it can be contact. It can be mourning. It can be a way of resisting disconnection. The pressure to treat each incident as isolated, accidental, or merely personal. In the therapeutic work I'm trying to describe, such disconnections may begin to be noticed, not tidied away, not too quickly repaired, but brought into view. And maybe, and just maybe from there, something more truthful becomes possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bafo. See all the applause for yourself again. As always, a pleasure to hear you speak about your work. Incredibly rich. Please give him your applause. Oh, that's another powerful talk, really. We're not, I think we're just over halfway through. We've still got a way to go. And I know we're running a little bit behind time, but that's okay. I'm going to invite Charles Brown, if I may please, to come to the virtual stage. It's a strange phrase that. Morning, Charles.
Morning, Dwight.
Now, myself and Charles, well, to be honest, this is Charles's paper. Black Men and Psychosis, Race Sexualization and the Failure of Psychoanalysis. Although there's an interview part of it, I'm not actually going to say very much because I'm going to give you the time in your 7 minutes to talk about the paper. Please tell us about it.
Aye, okay, quite, yeah, fine, no problem. First, I want to say thanks. This is incredible. This is incredible. From the conference to the book to today, it's been an incredible. I'm so grateful, and I'm pleased and humbled to be here. It's and to be part of this. So thank you, Helen. Thank you, Dwight, and Catherine, Kate, PCCS Publishers. My chapter is part autobiographical and part theoretical, and it explores the racialized experiences, psychosis, and therapeutic challenges faced by Black men. It highlights historical, psychological, and personal perspectives. In it, I've tried to tailor some of my insights for mental health professionals, focusing on cultural competence. Some of my findings and recommendations, because I make recommendations because I'm that kind of guy, in my chapter emphasize actionable guidance, and I give some examples. I also explore historical and cultural and contemporary factors that influence the understanding, the diagnosis, and the treatment of psychosis in Black men, using a psychoanalytic perspective, emphasizing systemic racism, sexualization, and again, a need for culturally sensitive therapeutic approaches. And in that chapter somewhere, I said I've worked with people with psychosis, young Black men who have recovered. And in there, I wonder whether psychosis and psychotic experiences may be a potential creative or reconstitutive process. That's just a developmental thing in my own thinking. The chapter was interesting because it was held personal narratives for me. I share my life experience around racism and my education, struggles in my education, and my journey into training. First as a psychodynamic counselor and addictions therapist, and later as a psychoanalytic psychotherapist. I highlight the impact of racial abuse and the importance for me to learn something about my origins, my African history, and my own development of cultural awareness. The chapter presented me with the opportunity to be seen as well, to offer readers a look at me, something that I'm not really used to, that isn't analytic. And I wondered whether being seen and being looked at was robbing the client of something, self-determination, autonomy. And for me, it conjured up the concept of Schaulust, the pleasure in looking that's derived in looking, and the childhood process of forming a personality, in the processes and stages of identification. I talk about challenges in training, and again about forming a psychoanalytic identity, professional identity, whilst being a minority within a minoritized community, and say something about retaining one's identity within a Eurocentric model that one has to, or I had to, go beyond to seek further learning, because I wasn't taught to look or to work or to look at other minoritized individuals or communities. And I think this underlines for me the importance of culturally aware therapy, historical truth, and contemporary understanding of racial trauma. I link the historical and ongoing dehumanization of black men and link it to racist constructs of black masculinity as deviance and predatory, fetishizing, and sustaining. It sustains racial violence and the devaluing of black men's bodies. I think that the colonialism that has led to systemic racism amounts to what might feel like an insurmountable feature of society that shapes black identity and leads to something that actually my father was talking about Afro-pessimism, social death. I advocate for something like the deconstruction of the whole thing, actually, the whole system. Let's burn it down to the ground. Mental health practices and increasing cultural awareness amongst clinicians. That means all of us. Emphasis is on the importance of culturally informed diagnosis and treatment. I emphasize resilience and the importance of access to treatment, services and therapy. I thought the interview, again, I really enjoyed the interview with you, Dwight.
It's fun. It's good to do.
Yeah, being only one of a few black students in those classes. Actually, when I was training as a person-centered therapist, there was a different demographic, which was welcomed because there was more diversity, but it felt superficial and careless. And perhaps the welcome, and maybe the welcoming aspect of that is what draws people of color into, you know, the more person-centered theoretical approach rather than the unconscious approach. Yeah, that's yeah.
Well, I think you're.
Just to
No, go
say,
on, please.
it's a really, as you said earlier. I think, you know, this is a one-off. This is historical, and I'm really pleased to be part of it. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you are a part of it, Charles. And you know, as people are putting their applause in the chat for you there, as you know, an elder, I thought it was massively important that you were a part of this book because you had an awful lot to say and some good things to say. And please do read Charles's chapter. Really well constructed. Are we okay to leave that there, Charles? Yeah? All right. So thank you very much, Charles, for taking some time to talk to the audience today about your chapter. Whilst I'm here, let's give Helen a break. I was going to call up Ellis Johnson, who is here to talk about their chapter. Morning, Ellis.
Morning. Good morning. Thanks,
You
Dwight.
know what? One thing I will say before you start is when we met online and you told me what you wanted to write about, I had like a pen drop moment when I was like, you know what? You just need to write it because that's the bomb. There's nothing I can say to that. So thank you for being a part of this book. It's a pleasure to see you again. Please take some time to tell everyone here about yourself and the chapter after you.
Thank you so much, Dwight. Thank you, Dwight, and Helen for making space for trans voices in this chapter, in this book, I would say. And also just thank you already to the authors that have shared their work and their thoughts and their heart and their vulnerability, I think, already this morning. I'm blown away. I'm blown away already. So what has been coming to me as I've sat and really taken in what people have been sharing, I think from an academic perspective, from an author's perspective, but also from a personal perspective. What I think is interesting is how the policing of gender is inherent to our stories as black men and our history as black men. It makes me think about how okay, my chapter is from a position of transness. My position is a trans man, so somebody who was assigned female at birth, but has lived and medically transitioned into a masculine role, a male role for the last 15 years. It makes me think about the job that white supremacy has done on all of us, and how the reduction of our gender expressions was and continues to be actually an inherent part of the colonial project. This reduction to what we might call the stereotype at this point, but it's actually just the dehumanizing of the gender expressions and sexual expressions of Black people. We can understand that this is a tool of white supremacy culture. This is a tool of coloniality to dehumanize and to take away and to steal really the expansiveness of our genders and our sexual practices, our relational practices. This kind of stealing is with us, and we can name how it is with us. And we have been doing that this morning, right? We continue to be able to name it. It's not obscure, it's not subtle. We can feel it and we know it and we can talk about it, we can write books about it. So I think it's amazing that we're able to name it, because when we can name it, we can begin to undo it. And I believe that that's what Black transmasculine people are sort of spearheading, you might say, in a way. We are creating genders in our own way. We're reclaiming gender that has been stolen. We're reclaiming gender that has been lost, that has been demonized, and we're creating. We're creating at this point. So there's a part in my chapter where I mentioned that within, let's say, 2-3 generations of the kind of the Windrush generation, the sort of increase in immigration to this country in the 40s, 50s, 60s. Within 2 or 3 generations of that, we have young Black people who are kind of undoing colonial notions of gender. We're undoing them. We're creating our own genders. So I think it's quite interesting that although the colonial project in some ways has succeeded in policing the gender of Black people, quite quickly, actually, we're starting to undo it as well. We're starting to undo it. And I think that's really exciting. So my invitation to you really is to read my chapter not just through a cis lens, if you are cis, cis being the antonym to trans, meaning that you're not transgender, you align with the assignment of birth that you have. So I would invite you to read the chapter not through a cis lens, but through a human lens, and perhaps through a Black lens, actually, thinking about what has been taken away, and what Black trans men in particular are trying to rediscover about our ancient, you might say, genders and sexualities. So to begin there, I think is useful. My 7 minutes stop almost already up. I've not said 5% of what I was going to say. But my chapter really is about that complexity, the challenge of trying to rediscover a gender and create a gender in the gaze, the kind of the brutal gaze of white supremacy culture. So the Black trans masculine people in my chapter are struggling with finding a home really for their gender. They're grieving what has been taken away from us, the expansiveness, the idea that we have to fit neatly into a box. They are struggling to embody a gender that feels aligned for them, that isn't just simply in line with stereotypes. So there are parts of my chapter where I talk about a client who is explaining that to move into masculinity, to move into a more masculine role, you have to take up more space, you have to stand wider, stronger, be louder, perhaps be in some ways more ready to be aggressive. This is the way that I would say cis men, I mean, we're talking in very, very broad terms here, but trying to find a cis masculinity that feels safe, whilst also at the same time being kind of hamstrung by this idea that Black men are inherently aggressive, they take up too much space, they're threatening, that people don't want to sit next to a black man on a bus, as an example. It's a very complex balance to hold. How do I kind of perform a masculinity, or perhaps the pressure to perform a masculinity, when black masculinity is not welcome? Actually, it is dehumanized and positioned as something to be afraid of. So this is a question that comes up for black transmasculine clients that are thinking about perhaps moving into a medical transition where they might pass more as cisgender, meaning that they might not be read as transgender. Sometimes it's a question that comes up of, well, yeah, what will my life be like if I am viewed full-time as a black cis man? What will my life be like? What are the costs to that? What safety will I lose actually in being maneuvered into that position? How will people understand me? What will my relationships be like? What is the loss and what is the gain actually of living a truth for myself? So this is a kind of a big part of the challenge in navigating the movement towards black masculinity. And I just wanted to share a quote by C. Riley Snorton from their book, Black on Both Sides. C. Riley Snorton is a black transmasculine person. And they say to feel black in the diaspora might be a trans experience. To feel black in the diaspora might be a trans experience. And what I believe they mean by that is the othering of black people, that there is a way to be that is correct, i.e. white, or white masculinity is correct, but blackness already inherently positions us outside of the parameters of humanness. So to feel black in the diaspora might be a trans experience, full stop. So I'm going to wrap up. There's lots more to say there, obviously, but I'm going to wrap up there by again inviting you to read this chapter through a black lens, through the lens of decolonizing gender, not just through a trans lens. And I'll leave it there. I'll hold there.
Thank you, Ellis. And I just wanted to say, in terms of your chapter, where is it? It's a rare and timely contribution to UK therapeutic thought and practice. And so, yeah, it's a real honor and privilege that you decided to, write in our book. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you. Okay, and so we are moving on to chapter 9. We are running a little bit over, so we'll probably be going over around 10 minutes, I would think. So I hope that's okay for you all. And so chapter 9, I'm going to invite Divine back on, Divine Chahura, and I'm not sure if Talent's here to join you, Divine.
I think it should be. Talent, if you're here, Talent Chahura, I think, there we go.
Ah, there he
we go.
is.
There we go.
Wow. Okay, and so chapter 9, Why Size Matters, working with Black men's narratives of trauma and mental health. Over to you, Talent and Divine. Okay.
Thank you so much. Talent, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you again, Dwight and Helen, for the invitation. It was a real pleasure to write this chapter with my brother, Dr. Talent Chahura, who's also a psychologist like I am, and a very wonderful friend, Dr. Delroy Hall, who can't make it today. As is the order, I've been really moved hearing powerfully in ways that have moved me. So I'll read a few things from the chapter. What we hope to do is just to give you a flavor of the chapter. So our chapter is called Why Size Matters, working with Black men's narratives of trauma and mental health. And we start by saying, if counseling and psychotherapy are to be fit for today's diverse world, then practitioners need to engage critically with ideas about ontology and the reality that Black men are not a homogeneous group. And then we go on to say, it is critical that we deconstruct the stereotypes and their preconditioned notions about Black men, because there's an abundant misrepresentation and negative portrayals of Black men, and it's important that we acknowledge the influence of these on our worldviews. We then ask some reflective questions for all therapists. What images come to your mind when you hear the words Black man? What has been the experience of working with Black men in your therapeutic practice and in your training? How much was covered in the curriculum about working with Black men, and how did it prepare you for therapeutic work with Black men, their mental health, and experiences of trauma? The last two things I'd like to say before inviting Dr. Talin Chirur to also speak is we give a taxonomy of the different kinds of trauma that we have noted, and I really loved the talks that have gone on. Attachment trauma, the experiences of our attachment as Black men, identity trauma, how we see ourselves, how society sees us, disconnectedness trauma, the disruption that emerges in our lives, self-actualization trauma, who we want to be, and the barriers that we face, survival trauma, relational trauma, this is dynamics about relationships, racial trauma, transgenerational trauma, and sexual trauma. And we go on to argue for a counter narrative in relation to diagnosis. And I think most people who've spoken today have already spoken to that. And then lastly, before Talin talks to us about this idea of size matters, I'll read another little paragraph, which is about sexuality. For Black men, there is often an awareness of complex dynamics with all sexual relationships. And this has a long historic as well as modern day narrative in which the Black male penis or phallic becomes the object of projection and desire. And I think Joel and others have really spoken to this. Often objectified, the Black body is also seen as grotesque at times. The history of slavery, sexualized media portrayals of Black men have perpetuated this polarization. And in line with this, the Black men we work with in therapy often find themselves with even more nuanced challenges in aspects of intercultural relationships. Talent, would you like to say a little bit more about your experience of us doing the chapter and anything else you want to say? I think I wanted to take 3 minutes. I think I've just done that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, bro. Yeah, it's been really such an honor to be a part of, I think, a revolutionary endeavor, and really honored to hear from all the experiences of all the co-authors. So we came up with this acronym, Size Matters, and really, after deep reflection on many aspects that perhaps help to identify or that contribute to the identities of a Black man, with a focus on who's telling the story of the Black man. Is it our own ideas, our own conceptualized learnings from a American Eurocentric lens? Or are we looking at the Black man as an individual? And therefore, with a focus on intersectionality, the S in size, capitalized, stands for social status, aspects of sexuality, aspects of spirituality, and safety. Yeah, safety within the therapy room, safety from their own experiences, and where safety was not. The I stands for aspects of identity, intuition, independence, intimacy, and illumination. The Z stands for the zone of flow, or a zone of proximal development. And oftentimes you hear Black men say, I was in the zone. And what does that mean? And that's a shared term. And what does that mean for that person being in the zone or being out of the zone? And the E stands for emotion, early experiences, aspects of ecology, but most importantly, emancipation. And I suppose if we're going to talk about the emancipation of the Black man in the context of mental health, emancipation not only of their identity, or emancipation of the ability to freely express themselves within the environments that they live in, but also how do we contribute to that emancipation from past trauma, emancipation to aspire to be their fullest self, emancipation to create a space where Black men can be their true, authentic self, but also room for growth. So I think it was a deeply reflective, very fulfilling process, but really honored as well to be a part of all the co-authors. I'll just say perhaps one last thing. Imagine if the book had just been written by one person, would only have one perspective. But the ability to have multiple co-authors, all being Black men, but contributing with different aspects, adds to the richness of the book. And this is what I suppose we are trying to propose with the Size Matters acronym of looking at the Black man not from only one lens, but from a perhaps wider perspective. It adds to the richness of how we understand the Black man, but also how we can provide a space for the Black man to be his true, authentic self. I thank you. And thank you, Prof. I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Now, listen, Dr. Taliteri, you are a true gentleman and a scholar. And
Thank
let's
you.
end on this. We would like to end with an emphasis on the importance of resisting with hope and holding hope in a world where Black men continue to face oppression, systemic racism, and discrimination. And we also want to highlight the importance of building on rich cultural strengths, such as community support, family ties, cultural pride, which all can be protective factors in therapy and a source of strength and a framework for healing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Dwight and Helen, thank you.
Yes, thank you both. Talent and Divine, thank you for, giving us such a wonderful sort of insight into the chapter and in the book itself. I'm going to call out the bow ties, so you've got to mention that. So, listen, what we're going to do to keep things tight, we're going to do one more, and that's going to be Anthony Davis and Helen George talking about Anthony's chapter. We're going to skip my one and we're going to go on to Q&A just to let everybody know that's what we're planning on doing so we can actually end on time. So Helen and Anthony, good morning. I will leave you to spend 6-7 minutes talking about the chapter.
I am just going to be introducing Anthony and then I'll be leaving him to talk to his chapter. And so welcome, Anthony. Thank you. And to everyone, chapter 10. And the title of Anthony's chapter is From Silence to Empowerment, Decolonizing Trauma-Informed Therapeutic Support for Black Queer Men. Over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Helen and Dwight, for inviting me to write a chapter for the book. I'm so honored, and just hearing everyone's summaries of their chapters and just their vulnerabilities has been so powerful. So thank you, all the authors, for just being. And I want to just start by saying that my chapter is in many ways an act of integration, and it's very, very personal. I bring together my lived experience with my clinical work and my research, and I wanted to demonstrate that I didn't come into being a psychotherapist and coach from a distance. It came from my own journey. So that's where I want to start, and that's why I start my chapter. Growing up as a little Black boy in the US and Philadelphia in the 90s, I had to navigate environments where there were very specific ideas about what it meant to be a Black man. And these were highly enforced. They were rooted in heteronormativity, hypermasculinity, and religious expectations. And trying to come to terms with my sexuality during this time, I now understand that I experienced layered trauma. And this was bullying, shame, confusion, and a deep sense that I didn't quite belong anywhere. At the time, I didn't have the language for that. I only knew what it felt like. And that's where my chapter really begins. It's not with theory, but with the felt experience of navigating multiple identities in spaces that don't fully make room for you. As I moved through my own process of self-acceptance and eventually into clinical practice, I started to notice something that really stayed with me. Again and again, I was working with Black queer men and other ethnic and sexual minority clients who were carrying very similar experiences to my lived experience. And these were multiple intersecting areas of trauma: racial trauma, homophobia, family, religious rejection, social isolation, and importantly, the internalization of all of that, manifesting as minority stress, which is what I saw repeatedly in the therapy room, showing up as shame, anxiety, disconnection, and a fractured sense of self. So what became clear to me as I started practicing as a psychotherapist was that these issues were not isolated, they were all interconnected. And that's what really developed my understanding around decolonizing practice with my clients. I realized that traditional Eurocentric models of therapy and coaching that I learned in my training, while valuable in some ways, were not designed for Black queer men in mind. And these mainstream models did not fully engage with the impact of colonial histories on the constructions of gender, sexuality, discussed by many of the authors here today. The role of culture, community, and religion was not really considered, and the lived realities of navigating both racism and homophobia simultaneously. So for me, as I discuss in my chapter, decolonizing practice is not just a theoretical concept, it's a clinical necessity. This means actively questioning whose knowledge we privilege. It means recognizing power dynamics in the therapeutic relationship, and it means creating spaces where clients don't have to fragment parts of themselves in order to be understood. Alongside my clinical work, I also discuss in my chapter my master's research that I conducted on decolonizing therapeutic support for Black queer men who experience trauma. In my research, I spoke to integrative practitioners working with Black queer men, and what emerged was very clear. Building a strong, authentic therapeutic alliance was vital. Using the self in a conscious and reflective way was needed, and adopting the decolonial approaches that were explicitly intersectional and queer affirming grounded all of their practices. For me, this research was something I already knew and was experiencing in my practice when working with Black queer men. That we need to expand our frameworks if we're going to truly meet the needs of this client group. In my chapter, I also discuss a case study with a previous client who I call Jared. Jared's story is one that in many ways encapsulates the themes I've been describing. He grew up in a religious African household where sexuality was not accepted. He internalized those messages, and over time, that shaped how he saw himself and how he related to others and how he navigated the world. When he came to therapy with me, he was dealing with anxiety, depression, and a deep fear of making decisions about his life. What we came to understand together was that these were not just individual symptoms, they were rooted in internalized shame, cultural expectations, and experiences of rejection. So, my task in my work with him was not fixing him, it was about helping him disentangle himself from these inherited narratives. And we explore together, as I discussed in the case study, where those beliefs came from, including the impact of colonial histories on attitudes towards sexuality and gender, and we worked to redefine his understanding of masculinity in a way that felt authentic to him. And through a combination of therapy and coaching from a decolonial perspective, I helped him and we collaboratively worked together to build a stronger sense of agency, self acceptance, and his authentic voice. And what really stayed with me about my work with Jared was witnessing him move from seeing his identity as something that he had to hide to something that he could actually embrace as a source of strength. So I think that the question my chapter really is asking is, what does it mean to practice in a way that is genuinely responsive to the lived realities of Black queer men? I don't think there is a single answer, but I think it involves being willing to sit with complexity, being open to challenging our own assumptions and training, and being intentional about addressing power, privilege, and the difference in therapeutic space. So I'll finish with this. For me, this work is not just about trauma recovery, it's about something much bigger. It's about creating spaces where Black queer men can fully exist without having to minimize, hide, or negotiate parts of themselves. As the title of my chapter says, it's about moving from silence to empowerment, and ultimately recognizing that healing is not just an individual but collective process. It involves deeply connecting to the social, cultural, and historical context we live in. So when we do this work, we create spaces that are affirming, decolonized, and relationally attuned. We're not just supporting individual clients. We're contributing in a small way to a broader process for change. And thank you so much for allowing me to share that with everyone.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Anthony, for actually talking about your chapter. Again, you can see the applause and the love that you're getting for that chapter. Please do read his chapter. The way you speak is brilliant. We are starting to run out of time, sadly. And like I said to you earlier on, what we're going to try and do, well, what we are going to do is I'm going to skip over my chapter because, you know, you can read my work at any time. It's not going anywhere. It's in the back of the book there somewhere else. Because myself and Helen wants to bring in David Weaver and Patrick Vernon, if they are here. Because we're also not going to have time for a Q&A. So we just wanted to hear from Patrick Vernon and David Weaver. If you could make yourselves known, and Sebastian, if you could find them and put them on the screen for us. May take a second or two. And the reason why I'm asking for Patrick and David to come up, we found Patrick. Good morning, Patrick, because I know you're a busy man.
Yeah, morning,
is
everyone.
that they both wrote some wonderful words about this book. And I'm going to start, Patrick, can you just take a couple of minutes to just tell the audience why you feel this book is so important?
Yeah, sure. So firstly, I just want to acknowledge Dwight and Helen for the vision of putting this book together. Because, you know, in reality, if you go to any bookshelf, in any bookshop or academic shop, you will not see many books written by black men for black men. There are often books written about us, but we don't have that central control. So I just want to acknowledge Dwight, Helen, and obviously the publishers, PCS, for their vision to do this book. And I hope that this will inspire some of you who have not written before to share your story. Secondly, I want to acknowledge all the men that have written this book, because some of them I've known for a number of years. So it's really fantastic that you have the platform to communicate your value, your perspectives, your clinical practice, and your lived experiences as black men, because it's not simply about an academic treaty. You're also sharing your own perspectives of black men living in this society. The reason, when I was approached, it was a no-brainer for me, personally speaking. As you know, some of you will know, I've been involved in running services, NHS services, mental health services, community services, campaigning, fighting for our rights, and also articulating the impact of systemic structural racism, Afrophobia, how it pertains to us as black people in this country as well. So that's why it was a no-brainer. I think the book is beautiful because it reflects, you know, as you heard from the last contributor, it reflects the intersectionality of black men. We're not monolithic. We're all different in different ways. And when growing up, there was a perception you had to be, you either there was nothing in between. You either was like a roadman or a geek. I was a geek anyway, but that's not a story. But if you know what I mean, there was no reflections of our intersectionality as black men. You had to fit in these stereotypes of black men, basically. And I'm hoping that over the years we are dispelling that, so black men could be themselves. But at the heart of the book and the question that still, I won't take too much time, everyone. At the heart of this book is that in 2026, black men are not getting the right kind of services, the right kind of support, opportunities to express themselves. I'm not even just simply talking about mental health services per se, just to express themselves. And if we don't express ourselves, then we get caught up in the mental health system. This reminds me of the report that came out many years ago, Breaking Circles of Fear. There's still a fear factor of the system against black men, and we have a fear against the system too. And the role of black therapists are important intermediaries in that breaking of that confidence for men to come forward to share their experiences to get the right support. But I know over the years quite a few black therapists, men and women, black therapists that have left the NHS to up their own practice because the NHS is still not meeting the needs. So we've still got a long way to go, but this is really important. Let's celebrate this. I know it's a hard time for all of us right now, especially we've got the local elections coming up next week. But let's celebrate this book. Let's celebrate us, and let's continue writing. thought leadership is really important, everyone. We need to communicate our thoughts to influence policy, services, etc. So I'm making a plea to everyone. If there's a book in all of us, some of us got about 10,000 books. Let's share and communicate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Patrick. That's really well put. Please do give Patrick some applause. Thank you for actually stepping up and saying what you said. And on a personal level, thank you for being an ally and a mentor as well over the years. It's been really, really helpful. We are running out of time, and I can't find David Weaver. Helen.
Yeah.
Oh, he's here.
Yeah, yeah.
Is he in the car? Is it? You see? Like... David, good morning.
Hello, good afternoon. You're not going to believe this. I was actually supposed to be at a landline, and I was being followed by police on the M1, and they weren't necessarily going for me, but I felt so nervous as a black man in the car, I slowed down, and that's why I'm here. So my apologies. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll be very quick because I'm very conscious that you're running out of time. First of all, I really wanted to congratulate the contributors of this book. Really important book. And I suppose I wanted to make 4 main points. I think in terms of the work that I've done with the counselling professionals and the work I do in terms of politics, this book is so important because it brings the two together. And when you read the chapters and you get that really authentic feel, and just listening to the contributors, it really demonstrates that this book is right for the current time and the experiences that we're experiencing in every single economic and social sphere. You find black people being at the wrong end of it, and black men in particular. We're seen as threatening, we're seen as all of the things that you've spoken about. And it's really important that black men and black boys who are really feeling for all kinds of reasons, disillusioned, disenfranchised and so forth, are able to connect. And I feel that having reviewed this book and speaking with so many people over recent months, and Patrick will be aware of some of this in terms of the run up to the May elections and going into communities through Operation Black Vote. These are the conversations that our young boys and our men are having. And so, yes, this book lands exactly in the reality of black men's lives right now. Secondly, it encourages and courageously names what is too often left unspoken about black men. And so just the points that have been made, Joel, the point you made, really, really powerful. And men often don't feel that they're able to talk about that in the ways that you've spoken about it today. And so it's really important that continues. And I think it challenges how we understand black men in a deeply human way, moving beyond the stereotypes, beyond seeing black men only through the deficit, threat, or resilience, but also looking at the power and the potential that we have. And I think it's important that we do that. History is littered in this country and across the world with the contributions that black men have made. And so I think it's important that we connect and interconnect all of the things that we've been speaking about. Because if not now or ever, and I've said that wrongly, well, the point I'm trying to make is that we need hope. We need hope. And I think the work that we're speaking about and the contributions that have been made lend themselves to saying we're better than this. We've got to have hope and we've got to move forward. And so finally, I make the point that this book's not just a critique. It's about rehumanization and how we begin to see, understand, and respond differently to black men, whether that's in therapy, in systems, or in society more broadly. And this is not in opposition to the really important issues that there are black women. I think what this does is complement it. And I think it sets the agenda and it sets the route map for how can we have conversations about our liberation, our social justice, through looking at ourselves as a community, not diluting the particular issues for black women and black men, but bringing them together because we really need to be doing this. We really need to do this urgently because the situation is not getting any better; it's getting worse. But I think the leadership that's shown through how this book is articulated alongside the work, Helen, you've been doing with Black women is so much needed. And thank you very much. And I'm really proud to be involved in this in the sense that I've been promoting it and been asked to speak here, but I feel very much at service and a servant to, you know, you wonderful men that have done this. You make me feel really, really proud. And I say this genuinely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David, for your words, and to Patrick as well. Thank you. Really appreciate your words for showing up today for us, but also for your reviews of the books as well. So thank you. Dwight, do you want anything to share
No,
before
listen,
Catherine
David
comes
and
on?
Patrick, thank you very much again. And David, please be safe wherever you are on the road. Yeah. To echo Helen's points, I really appreciate the reviews you've given the book and just how you've spoken about it with such richness this morning. Now we're running out of time. Oh, we've sort of run out of time, really. So, Sebastian, can we bring back in Catherine, I suppose, to start off with? Hello?
Well,
There you are.
wow. Gosh. Now, we want to say a big thank you to Sebastian.
Yes.
And the team at Online Events.
Yes. And to John for providing the platform for us. I just want to say a big, big thank you to him. Also to you, Catherine.
Yep.
Can't forget you on the journey we've been on together since 2018, thus far to now, for all your help. I also want to thank the contributors, because without them, we wouldn't be here.
Oh, and what a lineup.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It's such a privilege to be here.
It is. It's a privilege to
Absolutely
walk alongside them.
phenomenal. And to you, Dwight,
What I do?
for co-editing, my co-editor, conspirator. And lastly, to everyone who's joined us today, yeah, a big, big thank you.
The recording is going to be available.
Yes, I believe so. I'm not sure when, but we will get it and we'll put it out on social media and through my newsletter as well.
Sure.
And yeah, that's it from me. Oh, sorry, I can't forget the Black
Show the
Women
book
book,
Black
which
Women book
sits
there. Don't forget.
alongside
You know
the
what?
Black
You've got that on
Men
your
one.
screen there. Let me hold up this one here. So
Yeah.
we get side by side.
Yeah, and to
That's
shout
how it
out
should roll.
shout out Aisha, Leonie, Hannah, and Janice,
All here.
contributors to this book who are here today as well. So thank you. Yeah, and that's it from me.
That's it. And thank you to everybody who's come along. You know, keep putting your applause in. You lot have been. I love the energy. I love that. So respect to you all.
Yeah.
But thank you to everybody, to contributors, and that's it, I guess. We done?
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.